Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Holman, and we're recording live for June 4th, 2020. If you haven't subscribed already to our podcast, head over to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to the Wealthy Retailer there, and we'll keep you up to date on all of the current happenings. I'm going to throw it over to our background man, Rob Lollisher with Road 55, who's going to give us some great topics to cover off in today's podcast. Rob?
Right on. Thanks for that, Dan. How you doing today?
Couldn't be any better.
Couldn't be any better. Yeah,
Living the dream.
We're on the right side of the dirt, so let's go here.
Yeah.
Well, we got some really cool things that we're going to talk about this week. A big kickoff to us talking about the headlines from the world of independent retail. Today's show we'll be discussing a bit about a new approach of selling to customers, the tech behind social distance selling. Recently, Facebook Shops was announced. We'll touch on that a little bit. From cotton to synthetics, what's the best approach with clothing and customers and trying them on? And Dan, you're also going to share a bit about an independent retailer you're admiring right now, and hopefully share a tip or two. So let's not hold back anymore. Let's get going. And I'm going to take us into our first headline here. Dan, this was a story that it was on actually local in our region here from Edmonton CTV. And it was talking about these Edmonton boutiques, like a bit of their new normal, how they're working with customers, and pulling a quote out from this story. We had to get really creative, so we were offering curbside service. We were doing FaceTime appointments with customers, where we'd come into the store and meet them virtually and walk through what might work for them. So, share with us a bit about this story, Dan. What your thoughts are there?
This story, of course, in all transparency, touches, really close to my heart. I know Shona and Tara from Yo Mama very well. They're longtime CRS clients. And it was great to see, CTV digging into something that was relatively positive. I'm not a huge fan that they bookended the article with something negative, but, I think the shining moment in this article was the fact that, these ladies decided how to pivot their business. And, there's a balancing act that has to happen in today's retail world. And I'm not going to call it a new normal, because I think that's a bullshit term.
Right.
There is nothing normal about what we're doing today. We're reinventing ourselves. And this article sort of highlighted, the way that Tara and Shona had to reinvent themselves over the last 12 weeks. I love the way that it touched on the drop and shop. Here's 10 things on the curb or on your doorstep, and let's circle back and see what you want and what you don't want. I'll take back what you don't want. So, I think that we're going to see more and more unique ways to engage the audience. And I'll tell you that this is not something new. If we go back to the caveman days of retail, this is how retail was done. If you walked into a dress shop or a suit store, you had your first introduction with, probably at that time, the shop owner. And then that shop owner delivered goods to your door, and that was the level of engagement that we've seen, go back 100 years. That's the way retail was done, was very personal. And now we've come up with a way to deliver a very personalized experience, from a distance. So kudos to these guys for
truly just rooted in excellent customer service. And to your point, it's really forced everyone to, not only is this a great way to treat your customer, but it's the way you have to treat your customer.
It is. And, it's funny, you read some of the reviews or, some of the messaging, that's out there. I'm not speaking out of school. This stuff is out there on Facebook, and, customers saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe that they dropped it off at my store or at my front door. And, I'm so thankful for that." Well, that's, service above self. That's doing what the customer needs you to do, for them, not for you.
Yeah.
Consequentially, yes, the stores are going to feel some benefit. They're working a damn sight harder to get that benefit, but that's what's required today.
Yeah. So much was, I'd say society as a whole was built on scale and speed, like get as many
Yeah.
people in as quick a time as you can. And now obviously that formula has just been radically disrupted. And but in many ways, to what's going to make an independent retailer really stand out with that customer, it's this type of experience, really.
Right. And I think this is about being fast, not being first, not being best. It's about being first.
Okay.
The best car doesn't always win the race, right? It's the one that gets to the finish line first.
Right.
And so we've got to continue, throwing ourselves out there for our customer. And maybe there's going to be hiccups and glitches along the way, but we're going to get there ahead of, the competition, which I think a little further down in today's, agenda, we're going to talk about retail that hasn't moved fast enough.
Right. Well, speaking of moving fast, this next story comes to us from VogueBusiness.com, and I thought it was interesting where you kind of go into this new model, this new world, and added to that social distance selling. And so, just to read one little quote I pulled out here that. Even things like demand sensing tech, a forecasting method that can help brands understand consumer expectations when they return to stores. The new environment shouldn't be an experiment. And I think that line kind of touches home to you, because so much of what you guys do in your world is really not only looking back, but really looking ahead and giving the retailers a strong understanding of what's coming down the road.
Yeah. And, this article really touched on social distance selling. But the reality is, in prediction, one of the greatest attributes, one of the most sought after attributes of a leader is their ability to predict. And if you want to be a leader in your marketplace, you have to be able to predict the future or predict the outcome. Perhaps the future, that might be a little bit too wood, but
right. Yeah.
You've got to be able to predict the outcome. And we've been predicting outcome for a very, very long time. Vogue Business turned this into a social distancing and technology and data, but that's what we've been doing all along. We use data to help tell a story about what will happen. And it's becoming more and more important. And I'm faced with this conversation every day, as I re-engage with retailers on, planning and the power of predictive planning. And they're saying, well, the world has been erased. All of your historical data doesn't mean anything anymore. And I'm not going to argue that it doesn't mean anything, but one day's data starts to tell a story, and when we start to double and triple and quadruple, we find that data starts to tell us a story. And in this instance, they're talking about the power of, e-com and driving that social distance selling. But sales success comes from having the right inventory in the right category at the right time. And only prediction can tell you that. Everything else is dumb luck. And that's not to talk down to those retailers that don't use any predictive analytics. It's, there is an art and a science. They have, for a very long time, been pretty good artists and perhaps not as good a scientist as they need to be.
The article also touches on something I know you brought up quite a bit, the omni-channel experience, and so maybe share with us a bit about that and what you feel retailers really need to do when it comes to that omni-channel approach right now.
I'm going to start by saying, Rob, for so long, retailers have misinterpreted, omni-channel. We thought that it meant having an e-commerce platform. But omni-channel is really this synonymous service level, that it doesn't matter how we engage with her, they get the exact same level of service. And yes, digital, prowess is important. Yeah. Yes, having a shopping cart. Oh my God, somebody's going to slice my throat for, backtracking on this. I've said for so long, we live in a tactile world. E-com is only going to ever be a small percentage of what we do, but
There's a new playbook right now, and it's written in invisible ink. Right?
Yeah,
no one knows.
Nobody knows. Yeah. So, really in identifying your opportunity to deliver synonymous level of service, a synonymous level of service is what omnichannel is really about. So we have to have this comfortable data-driven presentation in the store, but that same presentation has to happen, on our social media sites, on all of our digital presentations, and whether that is in our shopping cart, on our website, on our Facebook or Instagram platform, or, TikTok or, Snapchat or whatever else we're going to use.
Right. All right. No, that was great. Thanks for sharing that. Just to let everyone know that this podcast is brought to you by our great friends at Canadian Retail Solutions. Since 1991, they have provided comprehensive point-of-sale retail software support and training, along with inventory management solutions to empower retailers in Canada and throughout North America. If you're looking for new solutions in your retail environment or getting ready to launch your new operation, be sure to check out retailbycrs.com for more information. Remember, Canadian Retail Solutions exist to make retailers better.
That's our goal. I mean, that maybe has a level of arrogance to it, but it is more from a place of confidence. The retailers that we're engaged with, we're really looking to help them just inch their way forward in this crazy retail world.
Well, and speaking of, I wouldn't call it radical change, but a big change that recently happened. We've got the story from Forbes.com that catches all the details about the new Facebook Shops. And it was just launched last week. And I'll read you a quote from Facebook put out themselves. They said, right now, many small businesses are struggling, and with stores closing, more are looking to bring their business online. Our goal is to make shopping seamless and empower anyone from a small business owner to a global brand to use our apps to connect with customers. That's why we're launching Facebook Shops and investing in features across our apps and inspire people to shop and make buying and selling online easier. Okay, Dan, the big boys are in the game now. I always say they work hard to make sure that you never leave their little picket fence yard. What are your thoughts on this recent announcement?
Okay, first off, the guy that wrote that deserves every bit of his $150,000 paycheck, because that sounded like this was built for the retailer.
Okay.
Well, I guess you get that I don't believe that's built for the retailer. And as you said, here's the challenge that I have with this. It is both a challenge and an opportunity. For sure, there are going to be some retailers that benefit, from steering away from more traditional shopping cart platforms and lean heavily on Facebook. That's really going to be for that, rookie retailer. It's not a professional. It's not a retail expert. It's a rookie retailer that's thinking, oh, this is how I'm going to be able to sell my e-commerce. But make no mistake about that. This is not for the retailer. This is 100% about Facebook capturing more information about their audience. Facebook has played second fiddle in the e-commerce world. They have been for a very long time leaders in the digital space, but lag far, far, far behind when it comes to their digital prowess and their ability to market themselves in a digital world. And now they're market themselves in a marketplace world, I should say. And, they've played second fiddle to the big A. And, they're looking to try to take a chunk out of, the Amazon playbook here.
Okay.
They want to hold on to their audience. People, I think it was in the article, it had mentioned that, hey, and maybe even, our friend Bob from the Retail Doc said, people spend a lot more time on Facebook than they do on Amazon. And this is about, Facebook Inc. gathering more data about you to serve you, more relevant information to you. And then PS, be able to hang on to about 5%, right? I mean, this is a revenue channel. This is not just a data play for Facebook. It's 100% a revenue play, which is really where they've headed. Every single action that they've taken over the last decade has been revenue driven, not people driven, not connectivity driven, but revenue driven. And they live under this blanket of secrecy that or maybe mystery that they're doing this for social reasons, to help people connect and like photos across platforms. But you as a retailer marketing on Facebook, unless you're spending money, even your own followers may not be seeing, your activity. So
yeah, this story definitely makes me think of, it wasn't many years back where, businesses were paying for likes, like they were doing paying and effort towards just building up their follower base. And then you kind of wake up one morning and it's like, none of that matters. Doesn't matter if you have 10,000 followers. It's working towards you have to pay to play. So probably when I read this story, it's without a doubt, you see it as it's a valued tool, but one you need to be extremely conscious of, that a day will come where they say, you know what, like you're making all this money this way, and we would like our piece of it. And I believe today it's set up that, if you're routing through like a Shopify store, right, or similar, it doesn't cost you anything. Obviously you're paying your fees, vis-a-vis Shopify, but they are making it that if you don't have anything, like here's your starting point. And to your point there about a new retailer going down this channel, but you'll probably find as the days, months, and years go by that the cost of that acquisition just continues to grow and grow. So,
right,
be mindful.
Be mindful. And I think that this sort of speaks to, both an opportunity and a challenge with platforms like Shopify. And please don't get me wrong, we're big Shopify supporters. They help pay the rent around here. But any platform that has an open API is inviting the entrepreneurial spirit in and saying, hey, you can have access to our, to our platform, to our hierarchy, to our structure, and build any kind of application you want. Well, that's what's happening here. And they're saying synergistically, hey, let us, bookend onto your software. We'll be able to sell on Facebook, and we won't charge the client anything, and you're going to continue to drive business through the Shopify platform. Well, at some point, there'll be a charge for it.
Yeah.
Everything starts for free. I mean, isn't that how technology begins? Hey, I want to try something new. Rob, can you give me $500 a month to try something new? No, but you can test it for free.
And back to your earlier comments of the omni-channel experience of retailers just making sure that I say like have ownership of how you're able to connect with your audience, and it just makes you stop and don't weigh too heavily on one medium to channel your message, because you will wake up one day and possibly the medium falls out of favor. No one wants to. Right. It's MySpace. No one's on it anymore, and everyone's over on TikTok. And oh darn, I got to build a community over here now. Right. So it's kind of working those things together.
And I think finding ways to incorporate all platforms and introduce, platforms into your mechanism, into your strategy on an ongoing basis is critically important. Yeah. I look at how, at the CRS table, we consistently are talking about, or constantly talking about, what else do we need to add? Where do we need to go, for that retailer? What is it that they're going to look for? Yeah. And, in the last 6 months or 3 months or 4 months, maybe even 6 months, it's been, how do I connect my platform to Shopify or BigCommerce or WooCommerce or Magento? How do I get connected? How do I get a seamless integration? And that's exactly, what Facebook is doing here. They're trying to catch up. Google and Facebook, the two most widely used websites in the world, suck at marketplace. And they're stepping up their game.
Yeah. So I think it's not even a week old, but are you hearing things from the street? Your retailers, have they jumped on this integration? What do you see happening so far?
No, and I think retailers are always going to be a little bit slow to start. They're so consumed with what they have to do today, that they can't see the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest. We're overrun. I'm going to go back to earlier where we talked about, the ladies at Yo Mama. Here they are, the two owners of that store, out delivering goods. Right. They're delivering product, and they're, doing FaceTime appointments and after-hour appointments and videos, and they don't have a breath to be visionaries in their business right now. right? And the time that we had to be visionaries was consumed by us, in survival mode.
Right.
You can't be a great visionary when you're in survival mode. You don't make good decisions. You become very insular. And that's what's happening in retail today. There is a huge resistance across the retail landscape, to open yourself up, to invest in something, to do anything, because you're so consumed with playing catch up. And, there's a huge focus on what we've lost.
Stop, take a breath, take a look around, and try and get a bit back to that, the vision, making the plan, and work the plan. Yeah.
Right.
Why don't you share with us a bit about one of the retailers you're working with right now, or that you've seen, and just share a good little retail story.
You know how much love I have for Yo Mama, and it's retailers like Yo Mama that are adapting and pivoting their businesses to continue delivering the necessities to their clients. Remember that, Yo Mama is in a very niche market, different than a dress shop or a ladies fashion store. Their client base uses them on a smaller time scale, for a shorter period of time, and much less frequently than a traditional fashion store. So it is this admiration that I have for their ability to pivot. I mean, that's the shout out. Here's how we pivot our business and continue moving forward. And, that pivot isn't owned exclusively by, Tara and Shona at Yo Mama. I think I'm seeing retailers across Edmonton or the greater Edmonton area continue to pivot. I feel as an admiration right now for those retailers that are dealing with, what's happening down south. I was on a webinar yesterday where Maureen from Skirt, one of our EOS clients, talked about the stores around her being looted and the walls being painted. And, these retailers that are being so resilient, as some asshole thought it was a great idea to toss a brick through their front window. And, they're saying, hey, we're coming back strong. You got to admire that in retail, in that entrepreneurial spirit that is, I will not give up.
Yeah, but a lot of strong retailers out there right now, because going through just incredible challenges that I saw a little post, and I can't disagree too much. 2020, I think it was written by Stephen King and directed by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rob, I'll tell you this, the challenging thing, here we are, we're moving into this spring period. And, where bike and skate, is really taking off and doing so well to, for those retailers to now start to feel like, oh my gosh, March is over, April's over, and here I go. I'm through May and I'm into June and business is picked up, to wake up in the morning and have to run over to your store and board up the windows, because of the fear of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a sad state. Oh. And those retailers that have that ability to comb past it, man, they've got my love and admiration for a long time.
Yep. Well, and one of those operational challenges kind of relates to our next story here. It's from the Winnipeg Free Press, and it talks about something that, in many respects, I don't think we ever would have paid much attention to in the past, like a process to trying something on. And I'll just share this one quote from the story that, most Canadian stores and probably Takeout Canadian and any retail store in the world right now are quarantining their touch products for 24 to 72 hours. For clothing items, they say this is effective because the virus is having a hard time surviving on soft materials, but still not quite known exactly what the lifespan is for different materials, whether it's cotton or vinyl, what have you. But what are you seeing happening out there, and what are your thoughts on that, Dan?
What are my thoughts? I want to gently say bullshit.
Okay.
This whole there's such a level of fear-mongering going on. Let's look at Canada. Let's separate ourselves from what's going on in the rest of the world. Let's be even a little bit more microscopic, and let's talk about Edmonton. Let's talk about the challenges that that we as a government are putting down on that retailer. You know, I go into one of my clients' stores. You know, I take a golf club in and I want it re-gripped. And he's like, sure, but it's got to sit for 14 days in Edmonton.
Right.
Can't touch my golf club. It's got to be in a bag for 14 days before he'll touch it. You know, all of a sudden, science doesn't mean anything to us anymore. All of a sudden, numbers are the furthest thing from our mind. There's 1.4 million people in Edmonton, and we've got 506 cases.
Yeah.
You can't count the number of zeros behind the decimal, you know, for your chance to be infected, but yet we're closing down our businesses. We're taking the very core of our businesses off the floor because someone touched it.
So,
you know, so here's what I'm seeing. Now, sorry, I don't need to rant off on that.
No. It's frustrating. It's created this significant challenge for, like you say, pick a challenge right now for these operators.
I mean, I walk into a store and they've got 12 bags worth of goods yanked off their floor, tied up in garbage bags, sitting on the floor in quarantine. Not because they're returns, because someone tried them on in the change room.
Right.
You know, and here we are, masked up, trying to do business with our customers. This is the craziest bullshit I've ever seen in my life. You know, and here we are. We are not in New York City. We're not in California. We're not in Minnesota or Michigan. You know, we're in frickin' northern Alberta. We have no density, and yet we're treating ourselves like we live in, you know, 27-story buildings on top of each other, 1 million people on a city block, and that's not us. And we are hurting our retailers so bad with this. And so for those retailers, okay, I'm gonna get off my little pissed off box here.
Yeah.
You know, for those retailers that feel like they do need to practice some level of social conscience and safety precaution, you don't have to bag the goods, steam the goods. It's been proven over and over and over again. You know, the 240-degree steam your clothes. They come out of the change room, hang them back up, steam them, and put them back out. Stop pulling, you know, the very asset and liability that you have, the asset to generate revenue or the liability to bury you. Stop pulling it off your floor.
It's tough when you think about the you know, you bring up Edmonton and just like on a case basis of what's affecting here, but you go to a different market, it's different numbers, and do you try to create this one set of, I don't even say rules, but best practices, or end up with 47 different best practices depending on the scale you're at?
I mean, we are trying constantly to apply one solution to several problems.
Right.
We're trying to globalize a problem that is very regionalized. You know, here we are with some of the most stringent, you know, guidelines in Saskatchewan where it's non-existent, right? I mean, look at Winnipeg. Winnipeg was the first province to go back to business. And yet they've got such restraints. You know, retail stores are open 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day. And, you know, you have to quarantine goods for, you know, 24 to 72 hours. And what's the 24? I mean, you know.
That's coming from the province, Manitoba. They're telling them that's how they have to.
Yeah, each province is dictating their guidelines.
Right.
And they're leaning hard on not regional data, but provincial and national data that is skewed by the mass numbers that come from, you know, provinces like Quebec or Ontario.
Yeah. So you think, you know, just more towards that good practice of, you know, clean hands, mask coming in, clean hands, mask going out, and kind of whatever you touch in between, you can have gloves on, but if you touch everything, it kind of everything gets. It's a moot point immediately after that.
Yeah. Listen, I watched a guy get out of his car yesterday.
Yeah.
Wearing a mask and pull his mask down because the person he was talking to couldn't hear him. Yeah. I mean, he was in his goddamn car wearing a mask. Who's he protecting in his car? Himself?
Yeah, it's it's a tough one. Okay,
It's crazy.
we won't beat this one up anymore. It's a tough, long conversation, and I think, kind of summed up from just keep working through those, sensible
Yeah, I mean,
best
well,
practices.
the best practice
Yep.
is steaming. I mean, if we're talking about apparel, the best practice is to continuously steam the products that are touched, returned, worn, and use a level of common sense in this process.
Yeah.
If someone walks into your store fully masked and gloved and whatever, they're taking some significant precautions already. If somebody's rolling in there, sneezing and coughing and carrying on, and, they're not using the same level of precaution, and you need to step up your game for your customer.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to a bit of that adaptability to, everyone's different, has a different scenario going on, and our scenario is different from theirs, and trying to strike that balance between, we got to get through this, to realizing that, okay, we'll take extra steps with this approach, this client. So give us another tip, Dan. Let's jump into the world of CRS, and
all right.
Let's talk numbers for a second. I don't think numbers can upset us too much right now, but
take a deep breath and back off. My face is going to get red, and blood pressure's going up here. Right now, one of the best tips, that we're sharing, even as a team at CRS, and whether that's the technical account team, the technical account management team, or in business development or in administration, we're saying you got to allow some data here to tell us a story. Right now we're feeling a lot of pressure from vendors to clean up debt that we incurred in February and March. And it's critical, that we're really scoring our vendors. And I'm saying to every one of our, point of sale clients, and the tech team, we're going to go into a meeting here in a half hour, and I'm going to reinforce this. Let's create good reporting. Retailers need to work with their POS provider to create a great vendor scorecard that allows them to key off on their ABC vendors, A vendors, those ones that are really true partners in the business. They help to define the assortment. And those are the vendors that need to be prioritized. But it has to come from not what I feel, not what I believe to be true, but what the numbers tell us is true. And that can only come from, analytics in your point of sale system. And you've got to be looking at it, by category or by DCS, by department class and subclass, and then by vendor, not vendor first. This has to be a categorical, representation of your business. And that's the way the customer is buying. So we've got to relook at that data that way.
Okay, well, that's great. No, that's a really good point for those to consider. ABC doesn't get much more simple than that, right? Boil it down to the numbers. Our last headline of the week to chat about, it was everywhere, but this particular story came from the Peterborough Examiner. Talks about Reitman's closing, Time Maternity, and Additionelle. I'll just read this one bit here that they said the strategic decision to close two beloved Canadian fashion brands was not made lightly, but it is necessary to enable our business to move forward as a profitable organization. The company's president CEO said, all of the efforts we put forth to turn these brands around were derailed by COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately we can no longer afford the required resources to bring them back to profitability. So, big chain. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, Dan, of people quickly read the headlines and it's the retail's dying, but there's a lot of it being these big store headlines that were. How do you think this relates to the small independent retailer, or what impact it might have?
Well, the impact it's going to have on the retailer, if you're in plus size or you're in maternity, like my favorite sisters at Yo Mama, you're going to feel some benefit because there's more market share available. The reality of this is large scale retail has the opportunity to reinvent themselves now. And they're looking at, I don't want to insinuate that they're using COVID as, you know, an excuse
Right.
to file for protection or to make changes or to get out of their leases. But they're really looking at this pandemic, this disruption, as an opportunity to redefine themselves. They didn't have that opportunity because they're not lean, they're not nimble. You know, you look at their spaces, they are not small footprints, they're big footprints in malls, in strip centers. And this really is a classic example. I think we've seen 10 really significant chains, you know, file for protection or come out with the closing of stores. You know, it started with Crew and Aldo, and, you know, now we're going to see this with Reitmans, and it's not going to stop. Every large scale retailer is going to take this opportunity, you know, to push on how powerful they are and adjust their business accordingly, and perhaps walk away from some significant, you know, lease obligations in the process and reinvent themselves. They're going to reinvent themselves. They're not gone.
I can see it, you know, call it a big business move where they've just, we'll say, seized on the right opportunity to this is we can right size ourselves, and yeah, no, I can see that. So, you know,
it doesn't matter how big a retailer is or how small a retailer is. We all have this misguided opinion that more revenue fixes our problems. And I speak firsthand. You know, I'm somebody that, you know, that chose to fix my operation by adding another store, you know, and another one and another one and another one.
Yeah.
And, you know, if your only solution to your problem is adding revenue, you're destined for failure. These stores, these big companies are popping up new stores to add revenue, and it's eventually going to come back to bite them in the ass, like in this case. So they're going to right size themselves, and it's a great opportunity to do that. But it's also the independent retailer can take this opportunity as well. We're seeing, you know, we're going to probably see, you know, a 30% attrition rate coming out of this, and it's going to be retailers that are right sizing themselves.
Right.
I had one too many stores, you know, I had one too few, you know, or two too many or two too few, and they're going to change.
No, I'm sure it's a headline we'll kind of see and talk about in weeks, months to come. So,
sure.
No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, we are really pushing the time limits today. I'm gonna you know, call her a day here, and I'm gonna ask you guys to head over to head over to retailbycrs.com. Join our newsletter. We've got a fabulous new newsletter that's launching, a weekly sort of hit off the headlines. Of course, a copy of this podcast. So head over to the retail. I want to say the wealthy retailer. Head over to retailbycrs.com and join that newsletter if you have not already done so. There'll be lots of links to the stories that Rob and I talked about today, and you can follow up there.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. As Dan, you just said, we'll have the links to these stories we discussed. A couple stories we didn't get a chance to chat about, but the links will be there, you know, talking about it's time to get your store online and the things you need to consider. Good little story. Also, a story about the new president of Management One, and I'm sure that's close to you, Dan, so everyone enjoy that. I want to say, you know, a big thanks for joining us today in the Wealthy Retailer podcast. It's brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. At their core, they believe in having real and relevant relationships, offering solution-based sales and services, maintaining a client-centered bottom-line focus, and providing credible and complete care. They exist to make retailers better. So thanks for joining us today, folks. Whatever you're listening on, please be sure to subscribe. And because week after week, we're going to be coming to you with the headlines that matter in the world of independent retail. I'm Rob. This is Dan. And we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Have a great week.